Hey everybody, Nick here. Have you ever wanted to scrape local service business email addresses? I'm talking the plumber across the street, maybe the flower shop down the block. Well, in this video, I'm going to show you a simple system that takes less than 20 minutes to set up that lets you scrape thousands of local service businesses in just minutes. If that sounds like something you guys want to learn how to do, then watch me build it. Now, as mentioned, this is a very simple system. And what I've done here is I've just whipped up a Whimsical. This is a visual flowchart mapping software. And I've added in the flow of information from start to finish. So we're going to start by scraping local service businesses from Google Maps. We're then going to feed that into an email enrichment platform called Any Mail Finder, and then we're just going to be dumping all the results into a Google Sheet. From a bird's eye view, this looks pretty simple. Now, I'm going to be building this out in make.com, so it's going to be a little bit more complicated when we actually get into the nitty gritty, but this is more or less all you need to know. We're going to be grabbing stuff from Maps, enriching it with an email enrichment platform, in this case, Any Mail Finder, and then dumping it into a sheet. Pretty straightforward, right? First thing we need to do is we need to find a bunch of people or a bunch of businesses that we want on Google Maps. So all you need to do is go maps.google.com, and I'm in Calgary over here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to type in the term plumber. And I'm going to pretend that my goal here is to just find a list of local plumbers. As you can see, if I zoom out from the downtown area, which is where I'm in, to more just the total city, we have tons of plumbers. And if I were just to keep scrolling down here, we'd find more and more and more and more. Eventually, there'd be hundreds, if not thousands. I don't know how many plumbers per capita the average city has, but I think Calgary has a population of 1.5 mil. So realistically, I think it's fair to say there's probably maybe 500 to 1,000 minimum and maybe more. Let's hypothetically say that this is what we wanted to do: scrape plumbers from the city of Calgary, Alberta, where I live. Well, what we need to do is we need to find a way to do the scraping, right? And so we could theoretically build some web scraper ourselves that goes on this URL with this latitude and longitude, and then goes from top to bottom, clicks this website link, grabs the URL, stores it, and then adds it to a big Google Sheet for us. Or we could just use a simple out-of-the-box solution that does 99% of that work for us. Obviously, if you've watched my previous videos, you know that I love simple out-of-the-box solutions. No use rebuilding a wheel if you don't have to. What we're going to be doing for this is we're going to be using a platform called Apify. Apify lets you build very reliable web scrapers fast, as you can see here. But probably the more important one is if you go to Browse Existing Tools, you'll see the Apify store. And this just has dozens, if not hundreds, of out-of-the-box website scrapers. It even has some email finders and stuff like that, although we're not going to be using that in this video. And basically just a ton of out-of-the-box functionality that just lets you do the 80-20 of website scraping without really having to dirty your hands with code and whatnot. So what we're going to be using here is actually this first one here. And I think it's only first because I've done a lot of clicking on it recently. But you're going to want to look for Google Maps. As you'll see, there are dozens of these. A lot of them are from these guys called Compass. Since it's a store, Apify basically lets different developers sell their scrapers against each other. But there's a Google Maps scraper, Google Maps extractor, a reviews scraper. You can see there's a Maps scraper orchestrator, whatever that means. In our video, we're just going to be using this one here at the top left-hand corner. But I want you to know if for whatever reason that one doesn't work, you are free to choose any one of these. It doesn't actually matter what input you provide to the system, as long as you have something that scrapes Google Maps listings and then gives you URLs. So yeah, we're going to be using this Google Maps extractor. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. I'm just going to click a try for free, and the cost here is very low, which is quite nice. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be putting in the term plumbers. The cool part about Apify is it just gives you $5 in credit just up front. So you could scrape a lot of leads essentially with that $5 in credits. This is just runtime. But anyway, I'm just going to be typing in plumber. And then down here, there's a field that says location, only use one location at a time. So I'm just going to be going Calgary. Actually, I can probably just type Calgary AB, Calgary, Alberta. This is probably going to be the same thing that's pumped into Google Maps right here. So yeah, I think if I type in Calgary, that should be fine. Number of places per each search term or URL. If we click on this little question mark icon, you can see that you can actually add in 9999999 as the limit, meaning if you do that, you will scrape literally every place in the whole city, which is obviously fantastic if that's what you're looking to do. In my case, though, if I were to do that, that would take a fair amount of time to run. So I'm just gonna type in 5, and we're just gonna use this as a sort of an example placeholder. But just keep in mind that at any point in time, you can change this to 9999 if you want to, and then you can also use it to iterate through different locations to scrape all of the plumbers in, let's say, I don't know, the state of Florida or something if you wanted to. There are a couple of additional features here. Deeper city scrape. Basically, if you go to the Google Maps place that we had before, You'll notice that as you zoom in or zoom out of various places, you'll see more listings or fewer listings just because they don't want to overwhelm you, right? So if I type in plumbers here, I see, I don't know, maybe 50 plumbers or so here, but if I zoom way in, click search this area, you'll see that now we're finding a bunch of additional plumbers that we weren't before. That's what this does. So if you enable this feature, it will increase the runtime by extracting more places. In our case, we're just doing 5. I'm not gonna click deeper city scrape. Just know that if you really wanted to get all of the leads, you would give that a click. In our case, though, as I mentioned, I want this to run quickly. I want it to be able to work in the course of a video. You have some additional features here. You can define the search area by much more precise parameters. So you can enter the postal code, you can enter the US county, you could enter the state, and then you could literally enter the longitude and the latitude if you wanted to really drill it down. And then down here, there are just a bunch of different categories that you could filter. You could look specifically for these types of businesses. The reason why you can do this is because Google just provides these, I think, as parameters in the search. So maybe you're only looking at beaches or something, or beauticians, or however the hell you say that word. I don't know. And then last but not least, you could also use a Google Maps search URL. So this URL right over here, you could just copy and paste this and then enter that in. And essentially what would happen is that would be the source or the input instead of this Calgary, Alberta plumber search instead. Okay, but I'm showing you how to do this in Apify. And what we're actually going to end up doing is we're going to end up porting this over to make.com, where I'm going to build out the flow from end to end. But the reason why I'm showing you all of this is just because I want to get you guys comfortable on Apify. And then once we know how Apify works, once we verify the input and the output, then we can worry about actually connecting it. So that looks good to me. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go down here and then press save and start. This is now going to basically whip up a server for us. And as you can see, the memory went from 0 gigabytes to 1 gigabyte. We're allotted 8 gigabytes because I'm on a free plan. I always use free plans for my videos, but I do have a functional Apify account. The reason why I use free plans is just to show you guys how much you can get done with $5 a month in usage. It's a ton. You can basically do all the testing you could ever possibly want. You could do more or less half of the scraping, maybe all the scraping you could ever possibly want. But yeah. Okay, and as you saw, that was really quick, right? A lot of the time, if you're doing 5,000 places, it may take you a little while longer, but because we were just doing 5, we basically did it immediately. And what you see here is we get a bunch of different pieces of info. We get an image, which is pretty cool. I don't really think we're going to need this image, but I don't know, maybe you could use it in some part of your flow. If you're looking to reach out to these businesses cold, maybe you could feed this image into AI, have it tell you something about it and say, hey, I love that picture where the guy is, well, maybe this wouldn't be the best piece of outreach for a plumbing company, but I love that picture where the guy's doing some plumbing. I don't know, maybe this one's better. Love the fact that you guys have some smiley faces and a Canadian flag on your uniforms. This stuff like that. You get a total score. This is the review score, review count, street, city, state, right? Tons of information here that you could use to customize your outreach, which is pretty great. But really the column that we want is we want the website. So thegentlemanpros.com/Calgary, mohflow.ca, precisionplumbing.ca, franksplumbingandheatingcalgary.wordpress.com. In order for us to do the email enrichment part, we actually need a domain name. We can't just feed in a business name. It's going to work maybe 30, 40, maybe 20, 30% of the time. If we feed in a domain name, it's going to work a lot more often. So basically what I'm going to be doing once we actually build out the flow, so I'm going to be putting every single row here through a filter, and the filter is just going to check for the presence of a website. If the website exists, then it will go through the rest of the enrichment process. If the website doesn't exist, it's not going to. So that seems pretty straightforward. How do we actually get all this stuff inside of make.com? Let's do it. All we need to do is I'm going to be using Google Maps extractors. Just make note of this URL here. This is sort of like Apify's sort of API, if that makes sense. You can see they even allow you to copy it. The reason why is so that you could just paste it really quickly into whatever service you're using to automate. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be using this module here, and I'm just going to be calling this Local Service Business Scraper plus Enrichment System. Okay, so let's pretend there's nothing here at all. This is all you see. What you need to do is you need to click on this button and go to Apify. And what I'm going to use right now is I'm going to use the run an actor, but the actual scenario that we're using is not actually going to use that. And I'm doing this just to show you guys how to trigger things from inside of make.com, but it's actually a little bit smarter not to do the triggering in the same scenario that you're doing the rest of the data. And I'll explain why in a moment. But we're going to choose run an actor here. Now, what you need to do next is you need to connect to Apify. So you'll click add, and then there'll be an API token. All you need to do is just copy this, paste this into your search bar, and then you'll head over to your Apify account with the API tokens. Just paste that in, and that'll do the connection for you. I've already done the connection, so what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be using this account. Under Actor here, you can do two things. You can map and then plug in the URL that we just did, or you could look for the scraper here, and you can see it actually already has the Compass Google Maps extractor, which is nice. You'll see there are some settings. It says run synchronously. Integromat will wait until the actor run is finished. Beware the maximum timeout for the run is 120 seconds. The reason why this is valuable to know and understand is because if you're searching for a ton of records, like, you probably want to be if you're doing an actual scraping job as opposed to just a video demonstrating it, you're probably going to need to run this and then get the results in another scenario. And that's what I was referring to before about not using the run this actor in the same flow that you're going to be collecting the information from. Sometimes these are going to take like 5, 10-ish minutes to run. Obviously, that's still very little time if you consider the thousands of different results that you could get. But in our context, we're going to be running this on, I don't know, maybe I'll increase it from 5 to like 30 just to show you guys what that looks like. So we're going to run it synchronously, but I know that it's not going to time out. So I'm going to leave it at yes for now. Okay, now we get to the interesting part. There's this field here called input JSON, and this is probably the most intimidating field in the entirety of Apify. All you need to do in order to satisfy that is go back to the actor here. And then you see how at the top left-hand corner, there's manual and then there's JSON. Well, this JSON is just a copy-paste way for you to put in all of the terms that you want into make.com. And you can see if I just hold Command and press V, if I just try and paste this in like normally, you'll see that like the JSON looks really shitty. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to right click and I'm going to paste in match style, and that'll just make it look a lot easier for us to kind of go through top to bottom. So deeper city scrape, if you remember, I turned this parameter to off. So in JSON parlance, that is false. Language, here's a location query. Here's where I type in Calgary, Alberta. The really cool part about this now is now that we have this in a scenario, what you could feasibly do is if you had some other module behind it, like a Google Sheets module, sorry, you could actually use that as the input for this flow. And if your Google Sheet is a bunch of cities like Calgary, I don't know, Minnesota. Is Minnesota a city? I don't know. I'm not American. Cincinnati, Toronto, San Diego, right? You could actually have it iterate through all of those, and then you could run this multiple times for each different city. So that's where the JSON comes really in handy. The max crawled places search is 5. I'm just going to set that to 30 for now. Hypothetically, let's just see what happens. Search strings array, and then here is basically a big array of the different search strings. We'll feed in plumber, I don't know, flower shop, HVAC, right? These are local service businesses, and you can feed in basically however many you want just by adding a comma in between and then adding your search terms, sort of like so. You don't need to add a last comma here. That's fine. Just that first, just the one in between records. But we're going to leave that here. And then for build and for timeout, you can just leave those blank. It's not a big deal. Memory, just leave it all blank. It'll just pick the default from Apify. And then you don't need to worry about like managing any of that stuff for now. Okay, so why did I get you to this point? All we're now doing is we're basically going to do the exact same thing that we just did over here, like physically in the Apify dashboard. We're just going to do it in make.com. And the reason why is because that's going to essentially enable us to trigger or sorry about that. Where the heck was I? It's going to allow us to trigger it outside of Apify, and that's just going to open the door to a ton of other API call shenanigans and just really cool things that we can do. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to right click this and press run this module only. As you see, it's taking its sweet ass time. The reason why is because this is actually spinning up a web server like I was talking about before. It's then pumping in all of our JSON. Then it's going out and it's actually scraping line by line, getting the website. It's actually just doing all that heavy lifting for us. If you remember last time, it also only took us, 15 seconds or so. Now it's taking us longer. And the reason why is because I've fed in more places, right? I did 30 instead of 5. So we receive this big output here. Looks pretty positive. We have the capital succeeded. Scraping finish. You can view all scraped places laid out on a map on here. It could take some time to fully load for large data sets. That's cool. Then we have a bunch of other parameters: meta, stats, options, usage USD. The one that's valuable to us is this default data set ID. All we're going to do is we're going to command click C. So I'm going to copy that. And the reason why I'm copying this is I just want to show you what the data looks like. And what we need to do is get data set items down here. Now, Apify separates the running of the actor with the actual data that we get as a result of that, because the data can usually be pretty big, right? You don't necessarily want to put all that stuff together. You want to make it accessible to people. What we do next is we go to this dataset ID and just paste in the same dataset from the default dataset ID parameter here. Now, if you wanted to run this as a scenario, obviously you wouldn't just be hard coding in the dataset. You'd actually go down and then let me just type in default. You'd actually use this this variable here, default dataset ID. But because what I'm doing is I'm just trying to run this next module once just to show you guys what's going on, I'm actually hard coding it. You can then select the type of data transformation you want. Just always click clean unless you are doing some very specific things. And then for format JSON, it's usually the best with a limit of 100. But keep in mind, if you have other functions that you want, maybe you want to like create an HTML page for the scraper or something, hypothetically, you could choose HTML, CSV, whatever. And then the limit, I'm going to choose 100, just use the default. And now that I have the hard-coded default dataset ID, I'm going to right-click, press Run this module only. And you'll see that I now have a giant list of every plumber that I was looking for. So about 30 plumbers total, all arranged in a bundle format here. Now, when you see 30 bundles like this, what this is basically doing is it's allowing you to run whatever modules come next 30 times, once per dynamic piece of data, once per dynamic run. So if we scroll down here to website, albertabesthome.ca, for instance, if I pump that in here, this is a plumbing website of a plumbing service that is in Calgary, somewhere within my search. Now, what we want to do is, because the rest of our flow, if you go back to local business scraper, because the rest of our flow requires a URL, what we're going to do is we're going to filter next. And that next filter step is just going to filter out all of the websites that don't have URLs. What we're going to do next is we're going to add that to any mail finder, which is our email enrichment platform. I'm going to show you how to set up the API call for that and all that fun stuff. And then finally, at the very end, we're just going to dump to a Google Sheet. But know that you can actually dump to a Google Sheet at any step in this process, right? A lot of people will probably look at what I'm doing and think, why isn't he logging this all to a database? Well, you can do that. If you wanted, you could have your next step be a Google Sheet. You could dump in all of the websites all of the searches into a Google Sheet, and then maybe you could separate it out using search filters or something like that to only grab ones with websites, just so that you have all of the data. You don't have to do any searches twice. In my case, though, I'm just being as simple as humanly possible, and this is really what I want the system to be like. I've sold systems like this for anywhere from $1,000 to $2,000, so I just wanted to recreate exactly what that looks like for you guys. Okay, great. So we have the data set items. What do we have to do next? Well, if you think about it, the next thing we have to do is we have to send this thing over to any mail finder, which is our API. Now, there's actually a module for any mail finder. This did not used to be the case. You used to not be able to do this. You used to have to like set up the HTTP request custom. So we used to have to go to HTTP, go down here to make a request, type in I don't actually know if this is the API, but it used to have to be something like this. Let's do company. Then we used to have to go post and then raw and then JSON. We used to put in a bunch of information here. So this is what I personally had to do when I was setting up that system. Now any mail finder has a very simple module that allows you to do all of that for us. And that's just what we're going to be using in this instance. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use the search for a company's emails module right over here. But I'm not actually going to go through the rigmarole of setting this up and creating the connection just yet. What I'm actually going to do first is I'm going to set up that filter. What we want to do is we want to make sure that website exists. The condition I'm going to be pumping in is I'm going to go down here to the web site field. I'm going to say website. I'm just going to go exists. In this way, if there is a bundle of these 30, probably going to take a sweet ass time to find one, where the website field is blank, the run will stop there. And then it'll go to the next one, stop there, next one, until it finds one with a website. So it's not showing the filter right now. That's just due to a bug. If we grab this module and kind of move it around, we'll see that it now says website exists. We could also just say website. It's probably a little bit shorter of a way, maybe a little bit more interpretable. It's always best to make these things as short and as interpretable as possible. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to now route this over to any mail finder. Now, in order to do this, you need to create a connection. And in order to create a connection, you have to do a whole thing with like your API key. So click on this. It'll say my any mail finder connection. I'm just going to go to nick@leftclick.ai. Then I'm just going to pump in my API key right now. Now what we need to do is we need to search by domain. What we need to do is we just need to feed in that website parameter, which we found, let's see, right over here. Now, if you wanted to, like if I couldn't find that, I could just go curly brace, 3 website. and do the same thing as me physically looking for this. But I was trying to keep it as simple as possible for people in this video. I'm going to assume that you don't have a pre-existing bed of knowledge. Okay, now once we have that, what we want to do is we want to add this to a Google Sheet. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a really quick and easy sheet just by going to sheets.new. And then I'm just going to call this, in my case, I'm just going to call this plumber scraping. We'll go plumber email scraping. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add, let's see, what sort of data would it make sense to grab from each of these items? Okay, we obviously want like the business name. So let's go business name. Then let's go website. That's the URL. Let's go phone number. I don't know how many of these are going to have phone numbers, but we should definitely check for the phone number. We could also grab the latitude and the longitude too. I mean, there's really no reason not to. If you think about it, like what is the additional work required here? All we do is we map a single parameter. Total score, we could say review score. Place ID, that's meaningless to us. Categories, we could theoretically add the categories in here. I don't really think it's that valuable. Image categories. And then we have a bunch of other settings down here, like we could get gas prices if this is a gas place. Planning, service options, reviews, places. People also search opening hours. Maybe you need the opening hours Monday through Friday. In our case, we don't. I think I'm probably happy with this. The last thing we need to do is we need emails. So I'm actually going to leave emails blank here. And the reason why is I'm going to use a formula to extract the email array. And then I'm going to have like an email 1, email 2, email 3, email 4, email 5. And I'm hypothetically going to say, you know, there's a chance that this scraper, that this email enrichment service actually finds like 5 emails for us. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a very simple formula here to take an array of emails that it generates for us and then split them into 5. And I'm just doing this off the top of my head. This is what I did for the client. There are many other ways to do this. You could actually do the separation inside of make.com and then have an email 1, email 2, email 3. I'm just going to use this email array thing instead, and I'll show you guys what that looks like. Okay, great. So business name, website, phone number, awesome. What I'm going to do is, personally, I always like to make my Google Sheets very pretty. One of the things that I talk about very often in my community, which teaches people how to do this stuff, is how important presentation is for the client. And I know this may seem simple, and all we're doing is we're just changing a font and we're maybe spacing things out a little bit. But I find that when I deliver Google Sheets or Google Documents or whatnot, and I just make the formatting just a little bit different than maybe like the default, it usually comes across as a lot better, and people think that the quality of the product that I've delivered is higher. One of those quick little hacks that takes you 5 seconds to do, but they can really change the game. Okay, now once we've added this Google Sheet, we actually have to add it. So I'm going to go to Sheets. I'm going to go down here, and what I'm going to do is I will add a row. Looks good to me. Then what I want to do is I need to go to the specific account that has the spreadsheet. What I want to do is I want to feed in plumber email scraping. That's the same sheet that I'm referencing up here. The sheet name is just going to be sheet 1. That's just referring to this. And then table does indeed contain headers. Okay, great. So now we can actually go through and we can map all of the data that we got from here, as well as the emails that we've gotten down here. So first of all, business name, what was title? Website, it's going to be website. Phone number, phone. You could do it unformatted too. In my case, I'm actually going to do it unformatted. I'm going to allow myself to deal with the formatting later. See how it's 1+1 space 403 dash, right? I could just do all that work myself, or my client could do the work. I don't need to do that work inside of make.com. Review score, total score, and now we can actually feed in the email array. Now, I could just add this in and just stick it in there and that'd be fine, but I actually want to show you guys what the process looks like. So I'm just going to run this a couple times without the emails, and we're just going to go from there. Now, because this run an actor, I don't want to test this whole flow from start to finish on new data. I just want to use the old data. What I'm going to do is I'm going to unlink this, and then I'm going to drag the schedule module over here to get dataset items. And I don't actually want to get all the dataset items in this case. Actually, you know what? Yeah, I kind of do. Let's do 30. Yeah, so I'm going to leave that as 30. We should have 30 bundles. Awesome. And I'm just going to run this once without the actual email array. I just want to show you guys what it's going to look like when this populates. One thing that I'll warn you guys is going to happen is if you add some formatting to the header row, all of the other rows are going to be formatted kind of weirdly to start, but that's all right. Press run once. We'll see that it already passed the website thing, which is nice. And the search for a company's emails flow was done. We actually found... it's a success true, which is weird. We're not actually getting any emails from here. Odd. Anyway, we're just going to run this scraper and go back over here. It's not like we were getting the emails anyway. And as you see, I mentioned how the formatting is going to be kind of weird. So what I'm going to do is just go down here and then reset this, then reset that. Oh, and then I'm not going to bold any of this stuff. So Command B, there you go, unbolded. And basically this module just takes the formatting from the previous row. So from now on, we're not going to have to deal with that. It's just going to grab whatever this format is and then just use the same one underneath it. I'm going to format this a little bit differently. I want this to look kind of pretty. And you see that some of these plumbing websites have sort of, oops, sorry about that. They have sort of weird like UTM parameters and whatnot. I'm not going to worry about that. Okay, so we verified that this works. So I'm going to press stop here, force stop. We verified that this works to add everything except for the emails. Let's actually go through the email step. So I just paused this, hence why there's this sort of like yellow warning sign. I basically forced the stop. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to look to see if there's a run with an email. Okay, great. So I see that there's one here, Calgary Plumbers and Drains, for instance. There's one over here, cross connection services. There's one over here with 3 different email addresses, right? And it looks like, I don't know, maybe half of them have email addresses. Looks like the first few didn't, but yeah, most of them do, which is quite nice. What we want to do is we want to deal with the case or deal with the situation in which there's more than one email, essentially. So what I'm going to do is I'll go over here, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to feed in just this whole email list, okay? If you want to see what multiple emails actually looks like the actual text that it's going to be outputting, we'll go over here, and then in the top right-hand corner, we're going to go to download output bundles. And you'll see that this is basically what I'm going to be getting. I'm going to be getting email list, Mike, Dan, Jim, basically all of this stuff just in like one big string. And let me think about this specifically. This is precisionplumbing.ca. Why don't I actually just run this and only this as a test here? Because I want to see how to do the formatting. I'm actually going to feed in just precisionplumbing.ca. Then down over here for the result, just for this test, I'm going to feed in this whole email list into the email array. And we're just going to see what it pops up as. So I don't actually need to run this 30 times. I only need to run this once. So I'm just going to go to limit 1. Run this from start to finish. You'll see that the second time it ran much faster. That's because every time it does the search, it actually goes and it caches the results. Okay, great. And you see how now we have Mike at Precision Plumbing, Dan at Precision Plumbing, Jim at Precision Plumbing, basically. What we can do now is we can split this email array, so G10. Oops, we need to add the delimiter, which in our case is just going to be this comma. And you'll see it actually automatically adds in all of the email addresses for us into the first, second, and third row, which is quite nice. I should note that this is not hard-coded. As you see up here, we have the split. So if you wanted to hard-code it, you would have to paste it without formatting, and you'd have to paste all these without formatting. But this is a very, very quick and easy and simple way that you can just very simply map across all these emails without having to deal with a bunch of make.com BS. If you wanted to do this differently, what you could do is you could add make.com logic, where you basically get from email list the first email here, and then the second email, and then the third email, and then the fourth email. But I like the idea of not having to hard code it in like that. I like the idea of just being able to add split on this first row and then just have it automatically iterate over every single email all the way down here. Like theoretically, we could, I don't know, one website might give us like 30 emails, right? So this way we get to do all of that without having to just do the logic in make.com and without having to sort of, I don't know, account for it, if that makes sense. A little bit more scalable of a solution that way. And yeah, you're probably not going to get 10 emails, but does not hurt, I want to say. Now, this email array for us actually isn't very valuable. So what you can do is you could just like minimize it and make it really small if you wanted to. Totally up to you. Okay, great. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to delete, let's do this. And then actually, let's just delete everything. And then what you have to do in order to make this work is you just have to feed in G, whatever the row number is, and then just delimit by this. You are going to get an error here, but that's okay. You could also say like if, I don't know, if, could you do exists? I don't know, but you could say like if G2 doesn't equal like an empty string or whatever, then run it. I'm not going to do that right now because, again, I don't really care. The $value exclamation point is fine for now. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back here to now collecting all of the websites instead of just one. I'm going to go back over here to doing a limit of 30. And then now we're just going to test this on that one specific data set run, which is going to be quite nice. Then we're going to iterate through all of these and just see how many of these emails we get, see just all the data that sort of comes through. Now, the first 10 or whatever are going to run a lot faster now because we've actually done the execution. And what any email finder is doing under the hood is they're actually storing the email addresses that they found, which is quite nice. And for some reason, this isn't actually adding in what I wanted it to. So hold on a sec. Title, website, phone unformatted. Oh, you know what? It's not adding it because you can't actually add this ahead of time. Sorry. I lied. You can't actually add all of that until you know what these are. So you have to go down here. So we're just going to delete all of these for now. And then we're going to run this one more time. There you go. This looks a lot better. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go all the way down, and then I'm going to change this formatting. I'm going to reset. That's going to stop what we had before, which is a bunch of weird format. And then I'm just going to unbold all this. And now we don't have the bolding either. And now that we've, previously it was just running through rows that were cached, which is why it ran all 13 of these so fast. Now that we're on actual data, we do need to slow down a little bit, and it's going to run these sort of like one at a time. I should note that you don't actually have to run it this way. If you run it this way, it's sort of going to take quite a while, right? As you see, it might be like a minute or I don't know, maybe 10 or 15 seconds or something per run. If you were to try and iterate through thousands upon thousands of rows, this makes scenario would actually time out. And that's where the API comes in handy, as opposed to using just these pre-built modules here. But anyway, we're getting a bunch of data. Then if I go through, you'll see that a bunch of these have email addresses, which is pretty cool. Not all of them are 100% right, but in scraping, you can never be 100% right. Like some of these are WordPress, for instance, and the reason why it's getting WordPress emails is because this is .wordpress.com. Basically, the top level domain here is this WordPress.com, or the root domain is WordPress.com. Frank just either couldn't afford to have his own website domain or just doesn't want to. And that's fine. What we could do as well is we could add a filter after this any email finder step so that the only rows that we're adding here have email addresses. That would make our thing look a little bit prettier too. I didn't do that in this case, but maybe I'll do that right after this finishes running. Okay, great. So it actually just finished running. And what I'll do is I'm just going to split G2 by the presence of this. Then I'm just going to go, let's just add all of these in. And you'll see that a bunch of these, if I add a filter and then if I sort, a bunch of these have email addresses specifically. It looks like of the, oh, hold on. We're getting a bunch of additional rows, unfortunately. I think the reason why is because I did not successfully delete the previous ones. So I'm just going to go through here and just delete all these. Oh, it doesn't look like I can. Okay, what I'm going to do is I will go back here and I'm going to filter out the presence of blanks. Okay, nice. So it looks like out of the, 26 that we fed in, we got 16. So 16 out of 26 is about 60% or so of the emails, which is a reasonable good result. Not the best result, but it's pretty solid. So, if you were to feed in 10,000 or so, you would get 6,000 email, 6,000 rows with the presence of at least one email. It looks like we also had, 9 records with more than one email. Oh, I guess I have to make that 15, actually, not 16, because this mat at WordPress is twice because I ran it twice. But of that, we got 8 with 2 emails, and then we had a bunch of these with 3 emails. So really, like sort of, if you were to count up the number of emails that you're getting out of the 10,000 websites that you supply, you'd probably get about 10,000. It's just some of these would be from the same business. Granted, it's fine to do that because a lot of the time the same, like if you just send it to one person, they won't reply. But if you send it to 2 people or something like that, the second person will see it, talk to the first person in the local service business and be like, hey, did you see that email that Nick sent us? And that can actually, sort of go to your benefit, if that makes sense. But okay, I personally don't really like the way that this looks. sort of got ahead of myself here and used these quick hacks. I don't like the fact that I have to add in that information. I don't really like the fact that I didn't filter it for the presence of email addresses. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down here and I'll say email list 1 has to exist. So now it's only going to dump emails in if the emails actually exist, which is pretty nice. And what I'm going to do is for email 1, I'm actually going to hard code email list. We'll say get. I'm actually going to hard code that first email from the email list. And then I'm going to proceed with my cute little formula from the second point onwards. That's what I'll do. And that way I can make it completely optional. And if you don't want to have a second ugly looking email, you don't have to. Just going to filter and unfilter to see if I have any additional rows here that I wasn't keeping track of. Nice, good. I'm going to delete all this now. And now that I have this email question mark, I'm just going to run this whole puppy one more time. It's going to run a lot faster now because I have the cached responses. It's pretty nice. And I'm just going to now reset the formatting. Oh, yeah, I got to unbold it too. One sec. There we go. And yeah, you see that out of all of those runs, we ended up with 16 ones with actual email ones. And then a bunch of them have more. Not all of them, but a bunch of them have more. And then if you, I don't know, wanted to iterate through more or something like that, you could. I believe in Sheets, you could also index or something so that you could start this whole process at the second row, not the first. But we'll just leave that blank for now. We'll just pretend that, you know, you only wanted to get one hypothetically. So I just don't have to make this very complicated for people that don't fully understand what's going on here under the seeds or under the hood. Okay, great. So that's the end-to-end system. But I mentioned to you earlier that there were going to be a couple of differences here insofar that we can't use this run, because if we use this run on like 1,000 rows or something, then it's going to take too long basically for us to be able to run this scenario. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to separate these two. I'm going to have one scenario. Let's do this. I'm going to separate this into two parts. The first is going to run the actor. The second is going to get the local service business data and then send to enrichment platform. How do I actually do this in practice? Well, I'm just going to open up another scenario here. I'm just going to call this scenario 1 run local business scraper. Maybe we should actually say Google Maps extractor, Apify scraper. And then I'm just going to copy and paste this in. And that is all this scenario is going to do. It's going to go on a schedule. Maybe I want it to run every day. I want it to run once a day at, I don't know, 12:16 p.m. hypothetically. And what this is going to do is this is going to run that scenario. And in the second scenario, instead of using the run an actor, we'll go back to Apify, but what we're going to do is we're going to look at watch actor runs instead. Plug that in here. And then we have to create a new webhook here. This webhook is going to allow us to watch that specific actor run. So go to actor and then type in Google Maps extractor. We'll say Google Maps extractor finished. Click save. That looks good. And then we're going to go into the get dataset items. And now we're actually going to map the default dataset ID here. Then instead of a limit of 30, I'm just going to set, I don't know, hypothetically, I'm going to pretend that we're only going to do 100 at a time. And then now we have everything that we need to actually run this in reality. So I'm just going to delete everything but Alberta Pro Drain Solutions, just because I want the formatting to be the same when this thing runs. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this. I'm going to run the scenario now. And now I'm actually going to go here, make sure this is all my data, right? We're going to search 30 places. Nice. Okay, build time. Okay, great. And I'm actually going to run this now. So this first scenario is actually going and then running the actor. You'll see that because I left the sequential run synchronously button on, it's actually going and it's not finishing the run immediately. It's actually going and it's actually running it. If you go to actor here, then we go to runs, you'll see that this is now actually going. And I think that this just finished. So now if we go back here, you'll see that we caught the successful run. We listed all of those records. And then what we did is we fed that into default dataset ID here. And now we're pulling in actual websites like Frank's Heating, Frank's Plumbing. And we're actually finding websites just like we were doing before, as I showed you. Now, these are going to be the same websites because I'm running a search of 30 and I'm just feeding the same URL. But you could, as you saw before, feed in a much deeper search by going and changing the depth settings and just making them go way, way deeper and then adding like 9,999 records or whatever instead. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop both of these. Oops, sorry about that. We're going to force stop you. Poor little guy. Took him out in the back shed and put him down. And I'm going to export these blueprints. Let's go here. Then I'm going to go over here, export this blueprint too. And I'm just going to name both of these what they are, and then I will add that as a link to the bottom of this video description. So that is that. Hopefully you now know everything you need to know in order to get out there and scrape hundreds of thousands of local service businesses for yourself. Very quickly, I might add. As you see, this is quite an inexpensive process. You could theoretically run a system like this for just a few dollars a day. You just need to spend money on the make.com operations and then the Apify, I think it's like memory or runtime or whatever they gave you the $5 in credits for. I love building make.com systems on camera. If you guys have any recommendations or suggestions or requests, just drop them down below as a comment and I'll add them to my queue. Otherwise, if you guys could do all that fun YouTube stuff, like, subscribe, get me to the top of the algo, and I'll see you on the next video.